Namaste everybody, my name is Lisa A. Romano, the Breakthrough Life Coach, and today we're going to be talking about how to set boundaries with difficult and or narcissistic people. Now, for those of you who are following my work and you have discovered that all of these symptoms that you've been suffering with your whole life basically funnel down into this idea that you could be codependent or co-dependent upon something outside of yourself. So we're supposed to incarnate on this planet and essentially learn right from the get-go that we are enough, that we matter, that our bodies are miraculous, and that our minds are these incredible computers that allow us to think deliberately and of free will and allow us to come into alignment with what is innate inside of us so that we can eventually, manifest the most amazing life experience that we feel like we want to experience. Whereas so many of us are inside of lives that don't feel like they fit. And they don't. And they don't fit because more than likely we are codependent on some idea that does not serve us. Now, on my road to recovery, I kept asking why? Why did I want to be a writer and end up in nursing school? Hated nursing school. Loved people, but I was so unhappy in nursing school and as a nurse. I was terrified as a nurse. Why are so many of us wanting to become artists, but we're police officers or we're lawyers and we want to be yoga instructors? Why are so many of us feeling one thing but living a life that doesn't really fit? Well, like I said earlier, on my journey, I kept asking why and why and why. And when I finally got diagnosed with codependency, thank the Lord, because finally there was a name to this crazy, maddening life experience that I was going through. And even though I was terrified, I had no idea what the hell it meant to be codependent. At least there was a name to it, and that gave me hope. So as I began this journey many, many years ago, trying to pull apart codependency and what it meant, I realized that I was codependent on everything. Meaning, I was codependent on my weight. I was codependent on other people's approval. I was codependent on validation. I was codependent on the weather. Meaning, I could not feel safe in my own skin unless all these outside situations fell into a certain order. That meant that I could not go to an event or a party and feel okay unless I was getting validation from other people. I could not be in a room full of people that I could not somehow manipulate and or control in the sense that I needed their validation. On the road to recovery, I didn't realize that the people pleaser that I was really the result of seeking validation and never feeling like enough. And deeper than that, because I still had to ask, but why was I that way? I love people. Why? I don't want to walk into a room and make other people feel like it's their responsibility to talk to me or it's their responsibility to validate me. It's not. I didn't come into this life experience with that person. I came in all by myself. So I wanted to know why I was that way. And what I discovered was that I suffered from attachment trauma, meaning that I never felt connected to my mom, and I never really felt connected to my dad. Now, they are unrecovered adult children of alcoholics who never felt seen in their own life experience. So they weren't connected to their selves. So they're very much live outside of themselves, trying to control all these things that are going on around them, including us when we were children, my sister, my brother, and I. So my parents to this day will brag about how soldier-like we were. We were soldier-like because we were terrified. Oh my God, we were so afraid to move left and move right because my father would glare at us or my mother would glare at us and we would be read the riot act on the way home. And it wasn't now this is the thing about attachment trauma. When you're little, the true trauma is being disconnected from mom and dad. So when mom and dad are yelling, it's not that you fear the yelling. You fear what the yelling means. This means you don't love me. This means I'm not good enough. This means you might abandon me. This means I'm going to be left in this big world all by myself because you're mad at me. Because the children equate the non-connection that is found in the anger between the mother or the father has for the child perceives that anger as a disconnect from love. So every time we were screamed at and we were yelled at, our tiny brains felt traumatized, and the fight or flight response was kicked in. And it should have been, because our parents were God to us. Our parents were everything. So to suffer from an attachment trauma due to being screamed at and yelled at, and yes, physically abandoned, and yes, physically denied nurturing, and yes, never being asked how your day was. You know, when you have parents who treat you with indifference, that's horrible. What is the message that the being feels on a sensory level? Also, dear ones, never forget that you are a sensory being, that you were constantly picking up information from the outside. Your little brain, your amygdala was being formed by 28 days after conception. Your amygdala is tied to emotion. So we were, even though our lives and our childhoods may have been filled with ideas and ridiculousness that led us to believe that our feelings didn't matter, in fact, our feelings were everything. Our feelings were the way you're supposed to navigate through the world. When you're in pain, that's a signal that you need to move away from that trauma, away from that drama and that chaos. But, you know, as if you've been watching my videos for a while now, you know that our brains don't always associate healthy pain and healthy pleasure with things that are happening outside of ourselves. For instance, I learned to associate pain with opening up and telling people how I felt. So I associated pleasure with shutting down. Now that works when you're a little kid and you need to survive, you know, from day 1 to day 2, you know, or year 1 to year 2 to year 3. It's a great defense mechanism. And that is the beauty of the brain, that it allowed us to figure out what was painful, and it allowed us to figure out a behavior that afforded us the ability to move away from that painful stimuli. But when you grow up in a dysfunctional home, those primitive default settings get screwed with so bad. So, you know, we were supposed to be told that we are enough. We're supposed to be asked, how was your day? We're supposed to be encouraged to talk about our feelings, to connect with our feelings, to validate our emotions. That was supposed to happen outside of us. When it doesn't happen outside of us, our attachment trauma is such that we continue to seek that attachment to our parents. This is the screwed up thing, well, until you figure it out. But what will happen is, as we move forward in our adult lives, we attract energy beings that are similar to our parents' vibration. Why? In my opinion, I think it's because, A, that's our attunement, that's what we're tuned up for. And when we come into contact with someone who resonates with our parents' energy, you know, all the senses in our bodies start to get excited, and all our brain knows is it's registering, I think, this increase in activity on a cellular level and an energetic level, and the brain has to interface with that activity. And I think the brain just says, oh, that must be an attraction. That must be why I love this person, or I'm attracted to this person, and that's a good thing. Well, if you grew up, for instance, with a father who is an alcoholic, and you're attracted to men who are alcoholics, dear one, then that's not a good thing. So is it your fault that you will have a natural connection to alcoholics? No, of course not. It's not you, it's your programming. But that is the way your brain will work in a primitive way. So we're going to talk about now, because it's 9 minutes in, I had to preface this video with this information. I don't want to upset anybody, but I had to preface this video with this information so that you understand how to set boundaries with narcissistic people moving forward. So when you understand your attachment trauma, when you understand your baseline, your emotional baseline, when you understand your emotional set point, which I talk about in Quantum Tools to help you heal your life now. When you understand these set points and these baselines, and you open up your mind and you're able to look at these set points, then you're able to change them. So you can't change something you're not aware of. So what's fabulous about being a life coach who works with wounded adult children is, as you begin to help them see, aha, that's why I attracted an alcoholic. Oh, that's why I attracted a narcissistic husband. Oh, that's why I'm attracted to, very sexual female narcissists, because my mother was a very sexual female narcissist, and she used her sexuality to lure men in all the time. She had affairs on my dad all the time. As a life coach, when I help people make those connections, it's amazing, because what happens is their level of self-awareness ricochets up higher. And what happens? Whenever you go higher, if you think about climbing, that's why people love, houses with the view, because the higher your house is set on top of a mountain or a cliff, the greater your view is, right? The greater your perception is. So think about that in terms of your awareness. The greater your awareness is, the greater your perception is of your lower forms of thought. So once you have an idea of how your thought forms were created back in childhood, and once you have an idea of how those lower thought forms have now shown up in your adult life, your mind is blown and you have a greater perspective, and now you can go in and actually begin setting boundaries, inner and outer, with yourself, and you can start learning how to set boundaries with narcissistic people. There go my dogs again. Forgive me, dear ones. So anyway, so let's say you're having a conversation, you're a codependent, and you've been attracted to narcissistic people your whole life. Not your fault, especially if you were raised by a narcissist or your siblings were narcissistic. Whatever, it's not your fault. It is what it is, right? Okay. Now, again, we're all about the solution. Can't focus on the problem, got to focus on the solution. So let's say you're at a party with, let's say, a narcissistic sister, and you are the scapegoat of the family dynamic, and mom and dad, throughout raising this one particular child, never set boundaries with her, because she was the one that always pitched a fit, and you were the one, maybe the middle child or the older child, you were the one that learned, it doesn't matter, this is interchangeable. But let's say you were the sibling who observed your sister and how she acted, and you were more aware, more empathetic, and you could see the bigger picture in the family dynamic, and you saw that mom was getting frustrated. So as a natural empath, or just a person who's very sensitive, you didn't want to add to the dynamic, so you shut yourself down. So a couple of things happened in that situation. As a child, you got to avoid your sister's wrath. Not a bad strategy. But what happens is that way of relating to the world becomes ingrained. It becomes a pattern. And then we marry narcissistic spouses, and then we attract narcissistic friends, and then we are the person in the office who never speaks up, and we are the friend that never speaks up, and we are the sibling that never speaks up. We are the sibling who's trying so hard to get validated by the family, but we keep getting steamrolled. We keep getting knocked over. So what's really awesome is once you see that, that's when you have the power to change it. So when dealing with, let's say in the now, with a narcissistic sister, for instance, we also have to understand this narcissistic setup, or the ingredients of the family dynamic that actually created this type of situation that you have, between you and your sister and you and your family, blah, 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 blah. You have to understand there's a dynamic at play. So if you know that, because your sister pitched a fit, or your brother pitched a fit, or your brother was a drug addict, and that's why the family was so preoccupied with him, and you got lost somewhere in the middle. If you know this is the dynamic, then what you want to do is stop contributing to that dynamic. So you may want to start saying no to family functions, or you may want to start, limiting your time at family functions. You might want to start playing with the word no when it comes to other people. So if you have a brother or a sibling who is a drug addict and is causing a lot of chaos in the family and is just not at a point where he can take care of himself, and mom calls you all upset and says, your brother's out of money again, and I don't have any cash on me, and he's got to pay his rent, and I'm sending him to your house right now. I want you to get some money together, go to the bank, get $1,100 for him, and I'll pay you later. You can start saying no. No. It's very, very difficult, but you can start saying no. What'll happen then is you're upset, you're rocking the apple cart, right? So what's going to happen is externally, your life is going to get bumpy, but what'll happen miraculously is internally, you're going to start to feel peaceful. amazing. I promise you that's what happens, but a good support system at that time will definitely benefit you. That's one of the things that you can do. So that's addressing the family dynamic that created this craziness that you're living with. When it comes to narcissistic people, dealing with them one-on-one, there are a couple of things that you can do. First of all, you have to be aware. And some people don't, they have trouble like labeling someone a narcissist or a pain in the ass, just in general. But, I think that when you move into the spirit of discernment, and it's not judgmental, it's just, I don't want to judge you, and call you a bitch and call you an asshole, and I don't want to do that. But, if I don't want to do that. But what I do want to do is be able to identify from a very logical place how you communicate and how you interface with the world and others. Because if I can discern how you interface with other people, then I can figure out whether or not you're a taker or a giver. So as you evolve, it'll be much easier for you to play with discernment versus judgment, which is a great tool. Codependents generally, they've had their words twisted, and we have been so messed with that the minute we tried to speak up for ourselves, a narcissist will say, oh, you're labeling me, or oh, you're judging me. And all you're trying to do is really explain your position. But most of them are so clever with the way they twist our words that, the minute you say to a narcissist, let's say a narcissist says, well, you should have cared about how I felt. And then you defend yourself and say, well, I didn't see you care about how I felt. They'll turn it into, well, you judged me. Completely bypassing this concept that they started with you first. They don't see it. Narcissists don't see it. Narcissists do not acknowledge the first action that pushed the snowball down the hill. They don't do it. They don't do it. So as a codependent who's healing, it helps us to be able to identify how people play in the sandbox. If you watched a bunch of little kids, you could, in about 20 to 30 minutes, if you watch like 15 children, you could pretty much figure out who the kid is in the crowd that thinks, A, everybody should take care of him, B, who thinks she has a right to everybody else's toys, C, who's afraid to speak up. You could figure it out. Now, you're not judging these children, you're discerning. So as adults, it helps us to discern. So start using your spirit of discernment to be able to do that. When it comes to setting boundaries with narcissistic people, you have to understand their agenda is to not hear you. So before you even have a conversation with the narcissistic person, you have to be very clear about what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a rock. You're dealing with a rock. So no matter how you try to have a conversation with the narcissist, no matter how willing you are to be able to permeate them and to work with them, it's not going to happen. You're going to get a rock. They're not going to see your point of view. The minute you try to hold them accountable, they're going to shut down. They're going to turn on you. They're going to talk bad about you. They're going to start clubs that talk bad about you. They're going to join clubs that talk bad about you. Forget it. They're going to try to pull people into the way they see you. And that's okay. So setting a boundary with a narcissistic person begins with your spirit of discernment, you figuring out what you're dealing with. And then secondly, it's a really, really good idea for you to understand that if you engage with a narcissist, what will happen is, and you're not really on top of your game mentally, they'll pull you into your root chakra wound. So if you were abandoned as a child, and that's why you are codependent, then and your root chakra gets activated by how the narcissist treats you. Maybe they're abandoning you, maybe there's silent treatment, maybe they're gaslighting you. Your root chakra will get activated. You set boundaries best with the narcissist when you learn how to understand that you have the right to break free of that trauma and move up the chakra system and learn how to say, no, I don't need to engage with you. So setting boundaries with a narcissist involves very high level of self-awareness, discernment, the power to say no in spite of the fact that drama is going to ensue outside of you. And also understanding that when you go in knowing what your agenda is with the narcissist, it is not to get pulled into the drama, then you are in a great position to not attach yourself to an outcome. So never attach yourself to an outcome with a narcissist. Always know that you cannot rely on a narcissist to agree with you. So setting a boundary with a narcissist must be about where you're coming from, what you can control, what your desired outcome is, and primarily it has to be rooted in being able to stabilize yourself to a point where you at least do not go down the rabbit hole. So we set boundaries with narcissistic people by holding on to ourselves, using the spirit of discernment, practicing with the word no, seeing the big picture, knowing that this is definitely a journey and this is a process, and that there certainly was, especially if you're in a family, there's a dynamic at play. And in the now, you want to start slowing down the momentum of that specific dynamic. And specifically, when you're trying to set boundaries with narcissists, you must know that your agenda must be primary, that you cannot negotiate in most cases with a narcissist. So before you even go in, before you even try to set boundaries with the narcissist, no, it's never about the narcissist and it's always about you. It's always about what you're willing to do and how far you're willing to go. Excuse me, because a narcissist is not going to change. The narcissist, once a narcissist feels like you're pulling the power away from their ability to control you, then they're going to dig their heels in even deeper. So you have to decide how far you're willing to go with a narcissist in any given dynamic. Let's say you're going to court with a narcissistic spouse. You have to know how far, like when to pull the cord, like when is enough, because you're never going to be able to control the narcissist. So I hope this has helped you, open your mind a little bit and expand your mind when it comes to thinking about lots of different things when it comes to dealing with the narcissist, and even about your own codependency issues and about the dynamics that create codependency in families. And essentially the video is really about helping you understand that setting boundaries with a narcissist is primarily about setting an internal boundary with yourself. You have to know when to pull the cord, because no matter how much you tell a narcissist, don't call me, don't text me, don't do this, I don't like when you say that, it's falling on deaf ears. They're not going to listen. So dear ones, bring it back to the self. Use my 1, 2, 3 process to help you deal with that. Figure out how you feel and just how far you want to put yourself inside this relationship, and know exactly when you've had enough. And you set the boundary for yourself inside self, and then you act on that in real time. So I hope this has helped you, dear ones. I bow to the love and the light in you. Namaste. Bye.